Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Tech Woke Podcast. My name is Chris, an information system security officer that works in the GovTech space. And in today's podcast, we're going to have a great guest. We're going to talk about auditing. We're going to talk about GRC. And for myself, I cannot wait to watch the podcast because when I was doing my own training, I was just going on YouTube. And one day I was just going through her training and I was like, who is this person? And I said for myself, I looked on LinkedIn and made sure that we connected, and we're here today. And without further ado, we have somebody that's been working in the GRC auditing space for about 15 years. She teaches, she coaches, and she does a lot in the industry. And without further ado, Peju, how you doing today?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited. To get people like with your expertise on the podcast is very good for me, and for myself, I'm willing to come and learn for myself. And I know you're gonna bring a lot for the audience.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
No problem. So just so the audience can get a better understanding about you, just kind of give me briefly who are you and what do you do?
All right. My name is Peju Adedeji, and I've been working in the space of GRC and audit for over 20 years. So I've been in this space essentially since I started working out of college. And what I do now is I'm a practitioner, meaning I'm still working in the field. And also I'm a coach. I help people get started in the field. I have various trainings that I use to help people. And overall, I'm just someone that truly believes that GRC is a great field for people to get into. And I'm excited to be here with you today.
Thank you. And from your videos, you definitely know your stuff. Like you break down things I've never seen nobody break down, like frameworks, CSF, all that different stuff. So just so we can kind of get a brief understanding, like what is auditing? And can you kind of explain briefly to the audience what GRC is and just kind of break it down for them?
All right, great. No problem. So one of the things about the field of audit and GRC is it's a part of a cybersecurity ecosystem. So when we talk about cybersecurity, there are different fields within that space. And audit and GRC specifically, they have to do with helping organizations address risk. So I like to define audit and GRC as the functions in an organization that help ensure that cybersecurity risks are addressed. And for those of you that might be wondering, what's risk, right? So risk is essentially what could go wrong. What are the bad things that can happen? Like security breaches, data loss, anything that could negatively impact an organization, especially from the cybersecurity perspective, that's a risk. And the GRC and audit function, they are tasked with the responsibility of making sure that those risks are identified and they are properly addressed. So in layman terms, that's what GRC is about. Does that, I'm trying to see, does that answer that question or is there a follow-up?
Yeah, it just pretty much answered the question. GRC in general is just identifying the risk. Auditing is either you can do self-auditing or third-party auditing is to make sure that, sometimes you say it's there or it's compliant, but really it's not. So auditing is, and I think auditing is overlooked. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think GRC has become so popular that people forget the auditing side. But I say audit is like their cousin. It's their family member. They're all sitting at the same table because even auditing is responsible for identifying, or maybe not identifying, for determining if risk has been properly addressed. So the way I like to describe is it when we think of it as a function within an organization where we have risks being identified and addressed, we have the GRC function. They sit on the side where they're identifying the risks, they're putting processes in place, they're putting the structures in place to make sure that the risks are properly addressed. But that's them putting it in place. Somebody has to check their work, right? For lack of a better term. So the auditing side is responsible for doing an independent check to determine whether or not those risks have been addressed, right? If the controls that were implemented were properly implemented. So the audit team, they're definitely a part of that team of the overall function for GRC. And their goal is that what we call that independent function. So they're independently verifying that what the GRC team said they've implemented is actually there and it's working as intended. So that's why I always say they're essentially two sides to the same coin. They're looking at the same issues or very similar issues, but they're just looking at the issues from different perspectives. So that's a good way to think about the relationship between GRC and auditing.
I love that's a very, very factual and quick to the point. Can you explain to me, like, with auditing, is this third party auditing or is this third party auditing?
And the beauty about auditing is there are different types of audit. It doesn't have to be third party audit. So you can have audits where it's an internal audit, meaning the organization has a function within the organization. There's an auditing function. So the internal audit team could be the responsible party, right? They could be the ones auditing. Or you can have a third party, like the consulting firms, you can have them audit your work as well. So, and the other thing you have to think about is the function of the audit or the purpose of the audit determines kind of who needs to do the audit. So for example, when you have Sarbanes-Oxley like SOX, you need a third-party auditor. If you have ISO, if you have PCI DSS, well, PCI, you might have internal auditors do some aspects. But the function, the purpose of the audit, and the rules of engagement, determining on the framework or the standard would determine whether you want internal auditors or external auditors. But the beauty is you can have both internal auditors and external auditors.
Oh, I hear that. So that's a good breakdown to kind of break that down, because sometimes with the audience and for myself, sometimes it's third party, sometimes it's not. It just depends on the framework and the organization. So
exactly, it depends on what they're trying to do, because sometimes the internal audit team is just trying to test internally to see, are the processes working properly, or are they in place, or the controls operating effectively. So for some processes, internal audit is sufficient. But there are some standards and frameworks that require third-party auditors. So you can have auditors both internally and third-party. So that's a great point.
Okay. So for a person, because even with me, so I teach risk management, right, for the federal space. So for myself, a lot of people come to me about auditing roles, right? And it can be a little bit different because I might not be doing what they're doing. My job is completely different to what an auditor might do. And again, a lot of it intertwines. If I was a person trying to position myself into that role, what would I do as a newcomer?
So I think when you think of auditing, a lot of people need to remember that you still have to have a lot of skill set that the GRC professionals have. Because let me use an analogy here. So for example, if controls are implemented, right, by the GRC team and the auditors need to test, well, the auditors need to be familiar with those same controls as well. So I'll say the difference, if someone is looking to move into the auditing side, they have to have a good understanding of systems, they have to have a good understanding of controls and how to effectively test them, because the auditor is responsible for testing, right, to ensure that there's adherence to the requirements or that the controls are operating effectively. So if you're looking to move into the auditing space as opposed to the GRC space, in addition to your GRC knowledge, you also have to have knowledge about those specific controls, the standards you're auditing against, and how to test them. But one thing a lot of people need to also recognize is that if you already have GRC knowledge, you're almost all the way there, right? You already know what the structures are, like you already know what the controls are. You probably already know the frameworks and the standards if you're already a GRC professional. So making the switch to audit, right, shouldn't be too difficult, because you'll be able to leverage that same information in order for you to move into the auditing space. But if you're totally brand new and you're looking to move into audit, a lot of the foundational building blocks are the same between GRC and audit. The only difference is in audit, if you're looking to go to that side, you just need to have the extra knowledge of how to test the systems.
Understood. And I like how you break that down. A lot of the times, and how GRC and our space is going now, a lot of people just think it as checkbox understanding. But from what I've been learning, and a lot of employers, even they tell me straight up, you got to understand the system. How does it work? You got to be able to break it down for yourself, because if you can't, so what if somebody challenges you? Say, what if it is compliant? So you got to be able to explain that. So I love how you gave that analogy.
And that's the thing. I hear this a lot these days, right? Compliance is not a checkbox activity. But the reality is it really never was, right? Maybe that's what some people did. But if you're a true GRC or auditing professional, you should understand that that was never the intent. The intent is always to determine, was the risk addressed, not on paper, not in policies, right, but in the actual system. So to your point, that's the reason why employers are looking for professionals that can truly understand the system, understand the processes, understand the environment, and actually help determine from the auditing side if the controls are effective, or from the GRC side if the controls and processes are properly implemented. So that's what people need to focus on, not just the check-in, oh, very high level, is this there, but truly testing the system to see if all those compliance requirements are in place.
I understand. So I know from your background, you might have helped out with training with CISMs, you might have helped out with the Security Plus, or a lot of people are trying to get their Security Plus and get those certifications and stack them up. I know people with sometimes with 20 certifications, stacking them up. From your perspective, can you kind of explain how important the certifications are versus actually having experience?
All right. I love that question because I get it a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you mentioned, I'm an accredited trainer with ISACA. So I do training for various certifications, and I have nothing against certifications. But the reality is that certifications have their place. At the end of the day, what hiring managers are looking for is who can actually do the job, right? Who am I going to employ and be able to give tasks that they can actually execute? And certifications don't necessarily teach that. Another thing you have to remember is when you look at the requirements for certifications, a lot of times they require you to have some kind of experience or knowledge, right? That's practical. So I think that itself just gives away the fact that certification bodies know that the certification itself, it's not sufficient to do the work. It's essentially, if you think about certifications, they're validating your knowledge or experience in that field. So certifications, I have nothing against certifications, but they have their place. If you're looking to get into the field, you can look to get certifications, but that alone won't be sufficient. What you really, really need are practical skills, right? The practical knowledge and the ability to do the job. When you pair that practical knowledge and the practical skills with certifications, then that becomes a great combination. But if you're just going after certifications, like you say, people that get tons of certifications and still don't have jobs, it's because they don't have the skills that the hiring managers are looking for. So if you want to put it in order of importance, for lack of a better word, maybe not importance, or priority, maybe that's a better word. So if you want to put it in order of priority, I would say look or go after the skills first, the practical skills that enable you to do the job, and then you can get certifications. And the bonus is that many companies, right, many organizations actually also have budgets to help employees get certifications. So I've had several instances where students got the job and their employers paid them to get the certification. So that's a win-win in my book. So again, nothing against certifications. They have their place, but in terms of making a job transition, getting those practical skills, I would say, should be the priority. And then you can get certifications as well. So, but those are my thoughts on that.
No, I understand. Like, even now, like, we're going to a different age now. And I know you do training where a lot of people want hands-on experience. A lot of people just tell you in slides. We used to come from that method, but now we have this new method. And then, like you said, a lot of jobs, they pay for training. Even for me, I do training myself. A lot of jobs will pay other people to do training so they can better themselves. And for myself, learning the actual system, getting more hands-on. And for myself, I'm learning to get more hands-on to be better for jobs because you can't adapt. I've been working in the field for 5 years, but really, if you don't keep adapting, learning new skills, that 5 years can go back to day one real quick.
So true. And so just a quick story. I'm not sure if we have time for this, but
take your time.
Quick story is, when I started in consulting, where I worked, I started off in consulting, one of the big four at KPMG. One of the things that these big consulting firms do is when they hire people out of college, they essentially take them through a practical boot camp, right? Because they know you haven't done this work before. So they take you through a few weeks long, a practical training program that's not theoretical, literally what you'll be doing on the job. And after that, they send you to client sites to start working. So that was my background. So I always understood the need for practical training, like you said, because people are recognizing the need to actually know the work. So when I decided to start my training program, I addressed it right off the bat to be a practical training program because I knew that was the need. Everybody is already, well, not everybody. There are so many trainings out there for certifications. But the problem that I was trying to solve then was everybody has certifications, or at least those that were interested had the certifications. but few of them had those practical skills, and that's what's missing. And that's exactly what hiring managers are looking for. So in our training program, from day one, we've always been the practical hands-on training program, because at the end of the day, we knew that that's what made a difference, right? I knew that when you went to work, your manager on day one wouldn't be asking questions about your certification. It's going to be about controls, what's implemented, test of design, test of operating effectiveness. How do you actually test? So to your point, I love that a lot of people are recognizing that now, and they're pursuing practical training programs as opposed to just certifications, because that's what's really going to move the needle in helping people get jobs. So I love that that's a little bit more popular now.
Yeah, I love it too. I wish that employers would do it more, because a lot of the times, especially it may be in the government contractor space, they just throw you out there, and maybe you have to learn by trial by error, or you can put yourself in a situation where you ask too many questions. They're like, "Oh, we don't think he knows it, what he's doing." So,
Yeah.
what based on that, can you kind of explain what are like the top skills that you think that are needed for auditing and just GRC in general?
So I'll break that into I'll say about three skills. So let me mention three skills that I think are needed. So the first one I'll say are the technical or functional skills. Again, going back to the ability to actually do the job. And they're thinking about GRC and audit, there's still different areas within that space, but you still have to know how to do the job, the technical, the functional skills of what you'll be doing day to day on the job, right? How to perform walkthroughs, how to test controls, how to identify risks, all those things. You definitely need those hands-on, practical, functional skills. And then another piece that's missing that a lot of people overlook are the soft skills, right? One of them is communication, because in the space of audit and GRC, you will be talking to people, right? It's not a job where it's just you and your computer. You have to be able to effectively communicate. And I've seen a lot of good communicators make the career transition because they really had a great, communication skill. So the ability to communicate verbally, written, because you're going to send in emails and all those things. I think communication skills are very key. And then the third skill is attention to detail. Because attention to detail, essentially, when you think of, you're reviewing configurations, reviewing policies, testing items, you definitely need to have attention to detail, because that's what's going to help you kind of notice when something is off or different or something that needs extra attention. So if I were to say the top three skills, like if I group them, the first group would be the functional skills of how to actually do the job. Then you'll have communication skills and attention to detail. With those three skills, I think will take people a long way into making the career transition.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that, especially the attention to detail. Attention to detail in our field, if you miss one thing, sometimes it can be an embarrassing moment, or it can make the organization look bad. And then communication, I think with communication, if you learn the skill of communication, you can get a job just off of that. But then also it would help with communicating to stakeholders, communicating
Absolutely.
to managers, and them trusting what you're saying. So
True. And like the communication skill also gets you, just like you mentioned with stakeholders, but you have to present your work too, right? So, and you have to be convincing when you present that work to show that you truly understand what you've done. So just, you mentioning stakeholders there, that's another reason why it's important, because if you're able to effectively communicate your findings and recommendations, it actually makes it easier for the stakeholders to trust you and to accept your recommendations, as opposed to if you don't have that great communication skill. And you were saying attention to detail, in addition for it, potentially causing issues with you not looking professional, it can actually be a true security risk, because you might have missed something, right? And if no one else catches it, that can be a risk in the organization system that could be exploited down the line. So just buttressing your point that those are really two great skills for people to have.
no, I agree. So when people are transitioning to auditing, GRC, those type of roles, a lot of the times they don't have experience. I've talked to people and I've helped people get roles with no experience. From your point of view, how would somebody with no experience, like for example, just like maybe if there was a program manager, you can use an example for yourself. And also too, do you have anybody that you taught transition into the role with no experience, and how did they do that? And
Absolutely. So the first thing I say is this. Most people think they don't have experience. They just haven't analyzed their current experience, right, to determine what experience is transferable. When I speak to most people, and I'm not talking about like fresh college grads, I'm talking about most career transitioners, they've already done something else before. And in most cases, after I speak with them, you recognize that they actually have a lot of transferable skills. They just didn't know it because a lot of them don't even know what GRC or auditing is. So that actually, they have blinders on. So first of all, I always tell people to don't think you don't have experience because you're taking yourself out of the game entirely. First of all, understand what audit and GRC is. And that's one of the things we teach. And then we help you identify those transferable skills because there are transferable skills. So just going with your example for a program manager. If you've been a program manager, you've managed projects before. And one of the things a project manager knows is managing project risks. So you have to do risk management and risk assessments as part of your projects. It might not be for cybersecurity, but you've managed risks before. So that is a direct transferable skill that you can use to get into the field of audit and GRC. So again, if you get those functional skills, meaning you get the practical skills from, by going through a program that teaches practical skills, not theory, what you can then do is layer on your existing skills that transfer on top of those practical skills. And then that's what you use to make the career transition. We've had so many project managers make the switch because once they take our program, then they realize I was already doing several of these things. I just didn't recognize they were linked to cybersecurity. And so that becomes their positioning. They've learned the skills they need, the functional skills for GRC and audit. And now all they need to do is layer on their years of experience in program management or project management or any other field, really. I'm just using that as an example. And they can use that to make the switch. So it reminds me of one of our, actually, we've had several people, but one of the stories I remember was one of the professionals that came into our field or into our program. She had 15 years of experience in project management. So she wasn't going to have to start at the bottom again in GRC because she's already managed people, she's managed projects, she's addressed various risks, just not for core cybersecurity areas. So by taking functional skills and then leveraging her 15 years of experience, she was able to land a GRC program manager role, right? Because again, you still have to be able to speak the language, but now in addition to that, you're bringing up your existing skills, right? So together, your existing skills and your transferable skills make your career transition positioning stronger.
That's a great answer. I mean, you could try. A lot of people had the experience. It's just how you phrase it.
Exactly. So I always tell people, don't take yourself out of the running just yet. It's not about the title. It's about the job responsibilities. So you have a lot of people, they're so fixated on the title. Oh, I've not had the audit title before, or I've not had the GRC title before. I'm like, let's pause. Let's look at the actual responsibilities you had on that role, right? Or in that position. And often you will find that there are transferable skills that they just need to layer on top of the functional skills that they learn in the program.
That's a chef's kiss right there. So I had another question too. For somebody, for example, like if somebody's looking for like an entry level role in GRC, right? What am I looking for? And this is for auditing too. Like, what is the positions called? Is it really an entry level role, or do they have entry level positions?
There are entry-level roles. So for example, I started in an entry-level role because I started in consulting. So what a lot of the big companies do, the big consulting companies, what they do is they go out to colleges and universities and they hire graduates and into entry-level roles. And what they do is, like I mentioned earlier, they go through a boot camp process where they go through really detailed training of practical work that needs to be done, right? Teach you, train you, and then you get started working. So there are definitely entry-level roles there. And we've had a few people where they were earlier in their career that were able to get into entry-level roles. But what I always ask people, again, just similar to the last question, is the fact that you want to get into audit and GRC doesn't mean you have to start at the entry level. You have to first give yourself credit for what you've done before. So in some situations, when students come to us and maybe they don't really have any experience, right? They've really not done anything before. They could be candidates for entry-level role. They can go into these consulting firms in the associate roles. You were asked, so those roles might just be associate roles for audit, technical audit risk, technical compliance. But those would be like the associate entry level roles. The title might not say entry level, but the job description, you'll see that it doesn't require a lot of experience. And that works for those people. But for most people, again, if you already have experience, you don't necessarily need an entry level role. It doesn't have to be a high senior role, but it can be an experienced higher role, meaning they're looking for someone that already has work experience, but also has functional knowledge of the GRC and audit space. And so those roles might also say associate, but they might require a few more years of experience, or they might be senior associate roles, or like I said, we've had people, a couple of our students landed senior manager roles because they had extensive experience in their prior fields. So it goes back to, what experience do you currently have? And then we analyze the job descriptions of the roles that you're targeting and make sure that you're not shortchanging yourself. So each situation or each student is different. I always say there's no one size fits all. Each student's journey is unique to their interests and their experience. So if you don't have a lot of experience, you can target the entry-level roles, the associate type roles. But if you do have some experience, you can target the more senior associate type roles. Or if you have a lot of experience in other fields, you could get a manager role because you're leveraging your prior skills.
Yeah, I like to hear that, because it just makes sure that, hey, this is attainable versus, okay, a lot of these roles say 7 years, but there are roles out there. And where do you look, like Indeed, LinkedIn?
There's so many job boards, and I love that you bring that up. A lot of people just go to Indeed and LinkedIn, but there's so many job boards out there. You have Dice, you have Ladders, you have a lot of other websites out there that have cybersecurity, GRC, and audit jobs. So it's important to make sure that you're casting a wide net and you're not just going to one site. And there was something you said now, it just skipped my mind. It skipped my mind. Okay, but there was something else you said I wanted to add on to. But the main thing is, go to different sites. Don't just go to one website. There's Indeed, there's LinkedIn, but you can go to Dice, you can go to Ladders and other areas. And I'm trying to see, there was something you asked just before you said about the job sites, and I can't remember now.
I was just saying, like, I'm glad that you made sure that it's realistic for somebody to get it, because a lot of the times with roles, it's like 5 years of experience, but there's roles with, yeah.
Thank you for reminding me. Okay, so, and one of the things I wanted to mention is, when you look at the years of experience and you read closely, a lot of times you'll notice that it says preferred, or it might say the word 7 years of experience in audit, GRC, or related fields. So it's important to note that, and a lot of people miss that. One of the examples I always give is, for example, when I was in consulting, a lot of my even managers at the time did not necessarily have a technical degree, right? So even when you see the degree requirement and they might say, maybe computer science, sometimes you'll see accounting there, or you might say the word related degree. So when they say that, it's because they recognize that audit and GRC professionals can come from various parts of the business, right? Because think about it, if you're a GRC professional and you used to work maybe in the finance department, you'll be a great add to the GRC team when they're putting in processes for the finance department, right? Because not only do you have GRC knowledge, you have functional knowledge of the finance area or the supply chain area, for example. So the reason why they use that word related field sometimes is because they recognize that there's value to having other experience outside of the core GRC experience. So it's just another way to make sure that, or to explain to people that it's definitely achievable. So don't think because you haven't held the title GRC or audit for 7 years, you can't land a role. That's not true. Most times in your current job, you're already performing compliance activities and you just didn't know, right? Or you're able to acquire the right practical skills and layer it on top of your existing experience and still be a solid candidate. So it's important to know that it's attainable and you can do it.
And I like how you said preferred, because even I look at it too. It said it preferred. We prefer a CSSP. Yep. Don't necessarily say you need to have a CSSP.
Exactly. So and so, in fact, you'll see sometimes they'll put all the certifications there. Preferred, CISA, CISM, CISSP. It's their wish list, right? They're just trying to filter down to the people that they feel will be able to do the job. So there are many ways that you can showcase that you have skills and that maybe you're pursuing one of those certifications. And we've seen cases where the organization will say, if you don't have the certification, it'll be in the job description. They'll say, or willing to obtain one within a year, right? That's a leeway again. They're saying, we know you may not have it, but we want you to maybe go get that certification within a year. So those are all things that show that they're not looking for perfection. Ultimately, they're looking for somebody that can do the job.
That's a great answer. How much does auditing even pay? Like overall, like what is the entry level? And just give ranges. You don't have to say a straight number. I know a difference between area.
So the way I like to answer that question is when you check the average salary of audit and GRC professionals on, I think, ZipRecruiter and some of these salary websites, you see that the average salary is listed right around maybe 94K or something like that. So I would say in general, on average, and those are the associate type roles, not the senior roles. So for those associate roles, you see definitely in the 90s to six figures, even very realistically. A lot of our students end up landing six-figure roles because, again, they're leveraging their prior skills, right? Their transferable skills. So I'll say, again, if you're newer, there are definitely roles that go between 80 to 100 in that range. But I always say also it depends on location. Right. So California, New York will be different from places like Texas, for example. So, but the average salary that's listed online is over 90K for the audit and GRC field. And that's by, I think, ZipRecruiter and some of these other sites. But again, your experience or maybe lack of it will determine whether you're on the lower end of that range or the higher end of that range.
Okay, that's a good answer. So for auditing role, can you kind of explain like what is the day-to-day? How does your job start? How does it end? And when do you start testing controls? Like kind of break down what is the daily job of an auditor?
All right. So I always say there's no typical day. It all depends on what you're working on, the project you're working on for that or during that particular period. But if you would say, what are at least some of the common things you would do almost every day, right? For example, you would have to do walkthroughs, which are the interviews where you're interviewing the stakeholders to understand their processes. So that would be part of your responsibilities, at least during the beginning part of your project. Once you're done with that, then your typical day no longer includes that. But general activities will include the walkthroughs, identifying those controls, which you'll do during the walkthroughs and by reviewing documentation. And then you do your testing. Once you've done your walkthroughs, you get your evidence. Then you do your testing to test, the design, the operating effectiveness to determine if the controls are effective. So for the junior to senior auditor, that's what would take up most of your day during those interviews, the follow-ups, requesting evidence, then reviewing the evidence so that you can do your testing. And then the big part that a lot of people don't talk about is the documentation. The documentation easily takes up most of your time because one piece of it is looking at the evidence, right, to make sure it's there. But then the second piece of it is actually documenting it so that, somebody else can look at your work and understand how you got to your conclusion. So the documenting part will probably take up most of your time in the more associate senior type roles. So those are some of the key activities you'll be performing.
So how do you deal with pushback while you're in the role? Sometimes when you're saying that this is not approved or you don't have evidence, how do you deal with that?
Communication skills. That's where those communication skills come up. And emotional intelligence. I always mention that this role requires emotional intelligence because you are passing on news that people don't necessarily want to hear, right? I don't want to call it bad news, but for some people, right, that's information they'll rather not hear. So you have to understand how to put the information together and present it in a way that it's still acceptable to them. So even though they don't necessarily agree, they understand. So one of the common things I always tell people when I'm working on projects is, you may not agree with me and that's fine, but I need you to understand why this is. So I think that makes people understand that it's professional judgment at that time. So the way I always tell people to address issues is make sure you have your facts straight, right? You don't want to go into a meeting and then your facts are wrong and you're trying to present something and they are, countering with other facts that are true. So before you present information on a potential issue, make sure you have the right information. It's well documented. And then you list it in a way that addresses the issue, not the person. Because the reality is a lot of people take their work personally, right? Because so when you say there's an issue with what you're testing, they may take it as a personal issue, but that's not the case. So when you're presenting that issue, always make sure it's about the issue and it's not trying to blame someone or make someone feel like they didn't do their job. So have your facts right, make sure it's well documented, and then present it, reviewing the issue, and then you highlight the risk because it all goes back to the risk score, right? The reason you found the issue or that you're looking at that control is because there's a potential risk and the control that's supposed to mitigate the risk. So in that situation, what you do is when you're presenting it, let them see the risk, right? So even if they don't necessarily agree with you, they understand the risk and they understand why you flagged it as a failure. And then they're more inclined to work with you to come up with a solution. So that communication and emotional intelligence skill, it really comes into play. And then just making sure you have your ducks in a row so that they can easily get on board with you. And unfortunately, you will have, one or two people that might be difficult. And that's why there should always be an escalation path of who you need to talk to next, right? In order to get the buy-in.
No, that's a great answer. Communication is key. And also with this role, I found out that you may have to create your own frameworks. I mean, can you kind of just, you don't have to go into you don't have to go into too much depth, but enough that's needed. How do you create your own framework? Because I think that's where it's going, especially with AI and things like that.
Can you explain that a little bit more when you say create your own frameworks? I want to make sure I understand what you mean.
So I found out, like in some organizations, like especially with AI, sometimes there's not a framework or a risk management framework for those systems. So sometimes you might have to create your own. Is it possible to create your own framework to manage AI, or do you just go off of framework that's already there?
Okay, I get what you're saying. So you're saying if there's no official framework that's in place for a particular process or system like AI, can organizations come up with their own frameworks? And I think that's something organizations can do. Now, one of the things people also need to remember is that frameworks, they're guidelines, right? Best practices. You can think of them as just something that gives an idea of what the best approach to do something is. When companies follow frameworks, it makes it easier for them to implement or build their own programs. But like you said, if frameworks don't exist, then you have to come up with your own programs, right, that address risk. And so often I say, when people understand the building blocks, and for me, I describe controls as the building blocks. When people essentially understand controls, that makes it easier for them to come up with a framework. And it all goes back to that risk word again, right? Because even with AI, why are we coming up with guidelines and frameworks and things like that about how our companies our organizations processes would work? It's because we want to make sure that we're governing AI right and that we've fully addressed the risks. So it's important to note that yes, if there's no official framework out there, then the organization, based on experience and all the other frameworks that exist, right, they can come up with what the risks are they are trying to address in their AI environment, and then controls to address those risks. But one thing I want to also mention, since you mentioned AI, is when we really step back and think about it, AI is just another system, right? It's not magic, right? It's just another system now that's using a whole lot of data and algorithms. So most organizations already have existing frameworks and processes that they are following. So most times they don't have to start from scratch. You can essentially expand what you're doing to address AI systems, right? So that's something that organizations need to recognize, that you don't always have to start from scratch, especially if you already have existing processes, existing frameworks and standards or guidelines that you use. All you need to do is make sure that you expand the scope of what you're doing to include those AI systems, because they're literally just new systems. You just need to understand the new risks that they pose and make sure those are identified and they're addressed in your program.
And that's a great answer, because like you said, a lot of the times it's already in place. So follow best practices, and like you said, the frameworks are the guidelines, standards. Yeah. So I did want to ask a question. What are some of the biggest mistakes that people make as an auditor when they first start off?
I'll say the biggest mistake I see people making is thinking they have to know it all. It's so easy because the auditor's role is to go in there, right? And you're supposed to test and determine if things are operating effectively, right? And the biggest mistake, especially for new auditors, is thinking there's a need to go in there like you know everything. But what that actually does is it limits you because you then are not open to learning more about that new environment you're going into. So the fact that you're a professional auditor or even new auditor and you already know about controls, you already know about frameworks and standards and testing, when you go to a new environment, you have to understand their environment, right? You have to understand how they've set things up, whether right or wrong. That's not where we are yet. But when you start off, you always have to start by attempting to understand their current environment. So I always tell people, don't feel like you need to go in there with all the answers on your first day. You're going in there first to understand what they're doing. And then your experience, your knowledge comes into play to identify the gap between what they're doing and what they should be doing, where they should be. So I always tell people, when you start off, listen more, understand more, ask a lot of questions, right, about what they're doing in that particular environment. And that will actually make you a better auditor because now that you know where they are and your experience knows where they should be, you can now provide, you have a knowledge of the gap. Now you can provide, how do I say it? Now you can test accordingly, right, to be able to determine what the true gaps are, what issues they have, and what improvement areas are there. So just going in there to understand first and then test based on where they should be actually gives you an edge as opposed to just going in there thinking you already know it all.
Now I agree. One of the biggest thing, and even in my career, sometimes you get an ego, and then you think, "Oh, I don't need to learn this. I don't need to know that." And sometimes it can end up biting you in the butt.
Yep.
So it's best sometimes. Hey, I don't know it all.
Yeah, and there are so many systems in the world. There are literally thousands of systems in the world, and the potential that you haven't seen a new system exists, right? So you have to be open to learning about that new system. You know what controls need to be put in place. You know what the compliance requirements are, right? But if you haven't seen a system before, there's no need pretending you have, right? That's again where you ask questions, look at documentation, learn more so that you can then be more effective in your job. So absolutely right. Yeah, right.
Okay. So I have a couple more questions. So with the future of AI, and again, we talked about it, AI is just a system, things like that. What do you see for the future? I know you've seen about Anthropic has vulnerability scanners where they can find stuff now, like in depth. They got all these new tools. Do you think auditing still going to be there, or do you think AI is probably going to take over that role? What did you think? What's your thoughts on that?
All right. That's a great question. So what I want people to first of all remember is AI is actually introducing new risks, probably at a scale that we've not seen before.
That's
So
facts.
when you have more risks, guess what you need more of, right? You need the GRC and audit professionals. AI is a system and it's a tool. It's going to help GRC and audit professionals work more efficiently, right? But it doesn't necessarily replace them. What audit and GRC professionals will now do is they'll be operating at a more strategic level, at a higher level. When you have these tools in place that can quickly identify vulnerabilities, you have tools in place that can quickly perform testing and give results, that's great. It means as the auditor, you don't have to do that grunt work where you're sitting for hours, going through documents when AI can do that. But that strategic thinking part is absolutely still needed. You always have to have what we call the human in the loop because AI is a system. It can make mistakes. It can hallucinate, right? So you will still need the audit and GRC professionals that are overseeing those AI tools to ensure they're doing the right thing and that they are really still addressing the risks. So I see in the next 3 to 5 years and probably even beyond that there is still a need for audit and GRC professionals. The work they're doing would become a little bit more higher level because the grunt work might be taken by AI or could be taken by AI, but they'll absolutely still be needed to make sure that things are still operating the way they should. So that's where I see AI going. And on the other hand, because again, like I said, that's from a tooling perspective. From the other perspective, as AI risks continue to grow, you need humans to kind of keep following up on that, right? Trying to determine, okay, how do we address this risk? What are the controls we need to implement? And all those things. So for the work itself, there's more work out there for GRC and audit professionals that understand AI systems. So leaving the grunt work actually frees them up for more of that strategic work of identifying and looking to address those AI risks being introduced, in addition to all the other existing risks.
Yeah, I like that you said that. The best bar you said, there's still, with AI, is going to be more risks. Like, it's not perfect. Nobody talks about the risks of using it.
Oh, yeah.
Where's our data going to? Who's it going to? Is it restricted? How do you restrict it? That's another job in its own. And people are creating so many tools with AI at a fast rate right now. That's basically what's going to go and happen. Right? It's going to be just going. I think it's going to create more jobs.
Absolutely. One of the analogies I use is when computers came into play, right? We had typewriters before. And you probably had a lot of typists that were worried about computers. But guess what happened? More jobs in the computer era, because it just opened up new possibilities. And that's what I see with AI here. I see that it's actually going to create more jobs. And you were talking about risks around AI. There's so many stories out there. People putting company data in ChatGPT, not the enterprise version, the public version, right? That's a risk. Shadow AI in organizations, people using different AI tools that the tech department, the IT department doesn't even know about. So the first task is, can we even inventory all the AI, systems and tools being used in the organization? That's going to require people to do the work. So those AI risks, and as AI, continues to evolve, will create more jobs. And I think it will create more jobs in audit and GRC because people have to manage that.
Yeah, and then a lot of people don't talk about that shadow AI. I think I was watching a video about it. A lot of people are using the tools, but the company don't know about it because it's outside the organization. It could be because maybe they don't think it's an issue. It could be maybe the enterprise software that they currently have at their office is limited, and they can't access other things that their AI tool will use. But either way, that's creating a risk in its own, and that's a problem somebody can solve too. How do you stop that? So
again. So it's a lot of work, because that when you talk about shadow tools, like companies have to leverage their IT teams and other tools to try and identify, areas where people are using that. And then you have to set up system configuration to stop people from downloading some of these tools or going to some of these websites. So it's going to require teams to get that done, right? So again, more jobs there. And then you have the GRC and the audit teams trying to inventory everything. What are we using? Which AI tools are we looking to build in our organization? What data? Data privacy becomes an issue as well, because AI, it feeds on data. It needs data in order for it to make those right predictions and things like that. What kind of data is going to train AI? Because if the data is not good, then the output's not going to be good. So there's just a whole lot. There are a lot of pieces that are linked to this, and different roles, different parts of organizations in cybersecurity that will need to be involved. So as AI continues to evolve, there'll definitely be more roles, and a lot of those will also be strategic roles as well. So I think AI, it's here to stay, but audit and GRC, I think, is going to be growing right along with it.
Yeah, and we're just talking about like the LMMs, the large language models. There's another thing with agentic AI. Like sometimes you want it to do tasks, then it's authentication, and that's where we're going in a lot of the private sector and public sector. It's just going to create more problems. So, and I like, you're one of the first people I've heard to actually break that down. So thank you on that, because that helped me out for myself.
Thank you. And when you just said agentic AI, I was like, that's a whole different Pandora's box, for lack of a better one. But like, there's so many issues with it. people giving AI agents access to do anything on their systems. Yeah, there's a lot of risk there. And audit and GRC professionals, if people are using agentic AI in the organizations, they have to understand how, why, what systems is it getting access to? Is it bypassing some of our security controls? Like, those are all the things that's going to give audit and GRC professionals work to do. So there's a whole lot there. Yeah, you're right.
And also with small businesses too. A lot of small businesses give it access to everything, but again, you can hack it. Eventually, it's gonna get to the point where you can hack it, and they thinking, okay, we connected to everything, but how do we secure it? And that's another job. You can make some money off of that. So
there's definitely a lot there, and sometimes it doesn't even take the hacker. The agent itself could malfunction. I heard a story of an AI agent that was asked to organize files, and then he started to delete files, and those files were no longer recoverable. So when you start thinking of the potential impact of that on a large organizational scale, those are serious issues that need to be addressed, and the hackers haven't even started. So the agent itself has risks, and then if those are hackable, that's another layer of risk on top of it. So there's a lot that needs to be addressed there.
And then we're not even talking about quantum. Once quantum comes, then we got AGI, and then but again, I'm just trying to hammer the point that, hey, there's going to be a job no matter what. It might be automated a little bit, but there's still going to be somebody they're going to need a human aspect to see what's going on.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're going to start winding down. We're getting towards that hour mark. For the audience, where can the audience find you?
So my website is www.youritcareer.com. I'm sure you have it linked somewhere. So that's a website for our organization, now various trainings. We have free resources. We have training programs. So that's where you can find us. And we also have a YouTube channel by the name Your IT Career. And I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, she's on LinkedIn. She's on IG. She's on all of these platforms. So just make sure you check her out. It's a lot of wealth of information, and she's been working in this field for over 20 years. So just make sure you check her out and just see what she's talking about. Also, too, can you tell the audience words of some, either can be a quote, it can be a statement, some words of encouragement, or anything that you want to say to lead the audience with?
Oh, okay. So what comes to mind right now? I think I'll say this one. It's not really a quote, but it's something I use a lot in my program. And it's simply keep moving forward. A lot of times when you start your career transition, everybody wants it to go fast. And for some people, they get results quickly. And for some people, it might take a little bit longer. But what I always think of is, if you keep moving forward, then you know you're going to achieve your goal. The only time you don't achieve that goal is when you give up. So for anyone out there that's looking to make a career transition, just keep moving forward. Keep working towards that goal, and you will be able to make it.
And that's something to tell you, because like this field is very stressful. Everybody talks about the good, bad, but eventually it gets to a point where it can stress you out. And sometimes you might feel like you're falling back. The only thing you can do is just keep moving forward, or just keep on swimming. And if you ever watch, I know you have kids, what is Finding Nemo? So I appreciate that quote. That's a great quote. Just keep moving forward, people.
Yep.
So thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you. And just to spend an hour of your time, I was educated, helped me even articulate myself and know what the future is. So I really appreciate you for spending an hour of your time here.
Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate you inviting me to the podcast, and I'm glad to hear that you also learned something from here. So thank you very much for your time.
No problem. So if you're watching on YouTube, remember, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, share the video. And also, too, for the audience, if you want to learn about risk management in the federal space, check out rmfacademy.io. We have a cohort every month. So just make sure you check it out. And remember, everybody, get 1% better every day. Peace out. I'll see you on the next one.